Jerusalem is revered as a holy city by half of the human race. For Jews, it is the city King David made the capital of his kingdom, where the temple stood, containing the Ark of the Covenant. For Christians, it is where Jesus died and was buried and rose again, and the birthplace of the church. The Old and New Testaments mention Jerusalem several hundred times. For Muslims, it is Al-Quds, the Holy, because they believe Muhammad ascended to heaven from the Temple Mount during his night journey. Set on the Judean mountains of central Israel, the old city of Jerusalem is surrounded on three sides by steep valleys. The Hinnom on the south and west, the Kidron on the east. Its history lies in layers many feet deep. The golden roof dome of the rock stands on the Temple Mount. It also identifies as Mount Moriah, where Abraham prepared to sacrifice his son Isaac. At Jerusalem's heart is the Old City, girded by a wall and divided into four quarters, named after the dominant ethnic or religious identity of its residents. Its area is less than a square kilometer, about 2/3 the size of the city in the time of Christ. Perched on its eternal hills, white and domed and solid, massed together and hooped with high gray walls, the venerable city gleamed in the sun. So small, wrote Mark Twain in 1869, when the settlements outside the walls had just begun to display shepherds from the Judean hills. The Muslim quarter, largest and most populous of the four, includes the Temple Mount with the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Other sites in the quarter include the pools of Bethesda and part of the Via Dolorosa. The Christian quarter contains the rest of the Via Dolorosa and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which enshrines the sites of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. Headquarters of several Christian denominations are among the 40 religious buildings in the quarter. The Jewish quarter adjoins the western wall, the sole remnant of the Second Temple Plaza, which is Judaism's holiest place. This quarter is more modern, with sophisticated shopping plazas. Archaeological remains are on display in museums and in parks. The Armenian quarter provides a reminder that Armenia was the first country to make Christianity the state religion in 301 AD. It contains the Armenian Orthodox Cathedral of St. James and a museum in the memory of the 1915 to 1923 Armenian Holocaust. The Mount of Olives, one of three hills on a long ridge to the east of Jerusalem, is the location of many biblical events. Rising to more than 800 meters, it offers an unrivaled vista of the Old City and its environs. The hill, also called Mount Olivet, takes its name from the fact that it was once covered with olive trees, and Jesus knew it well. In the New Testament, Jesus often traveled over the Mount of Olives on the 40-minute walk from the temple to Bethany. He also went there to pray or to rest. He went down the mount on his triumphal entry to Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, on the way, weeping over the city's future destruction in Luke 19:29-44. In a major address to his disciples on the mount, he foretold his second coming in Matthew 24:27-31, and Jesus prayed there with his disciples the night before he was arrested in Matthew 26:30-56, and he ascended into heaven from the Mount of Olives in Acts 1:1-12. The Garden of Gethsemane, near the foot of the Mount of Olives, is named in the New Testament as the place where Jesus went with his disciples to pray the night before he was crucified. The garden was well known to the disciples, as it is close to the natural route from the temple to the summit of the Mount of Olives and the ridge leading to Bethany. The name in Hebrew means oil press. Oil is still pressed from the fruit of ancient and gnarled olive trees that give the garden a timeless character. Beside the garden is the Church of all nations, built over the rock on which Jesus is believed to have prayed in agony before he was betrayed by Judas Iscariot and arrested. In the Garden of Gethsemane, behind a fence of iron tracery with Byzantine motifs, stand the gnarled trunks of 8 old olive trees. They create a spiritual atmosphere for visitors to the Garden of Gethsemane, and they also generate conjecture about their age. Were they silent witnesses to the agony of Jesus the night before he died? Israel has many ancient olive trees. Several of them have been determined to be over 3,000 years old. The present Gethsemane trees, however, were not standing at the time of Christ. The historian Flavius Josephus reports that all the trees around Jerusalem were cut down by the Romans for their siege equipment before they captured the city in AD 70. Research reported in 2012 showed that 3 of the 8 ancient trees, the only ones on which it was technically possible to carry out the study, dated from the middle of the 12th century. And all 8 originated as cuttings from a single parent tree. Some of the Gethsemane olives are possibly descendants of those that were in the garden at the time of Christ. This is because when an olive tree is cut down, shoots will come back from the roots to create a new tree. In 1982, the University of California carried out radiocarbon dating tests, indicating on some root material from Gethsemane that the wood could be dated at 2,300 years old. In a setting of neatly maintained gardens and trees, the garden tomb provides a tranquil environment for prayer and reflection. The open tomb carved into a rock face, with skull-like erosion in a limestone cliff nearby, can be found down an alley off Nablus Road, north of the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem. The site is a particular favorite of Protestant pilgrims, in preference to the cluttered Church of the Holy Sepulchre in the Old City. It is much easier to pray and reflect here than in the Holy Sepulchre, and there is a clear sense of what the actual tomb of Jesus would have been like than the dark and crowded traditional tomb of the Holy Sepulchre. The Gospels do not reveal the precise location of Golgotha, or Christ's tomb. They do say that, 1. Christ was crucified near, but outside the city and by a well-traveled road, since passers-by mocked him. And 2. He was buried in a new tomb, hewn out of rock in a nearby garden. The garden tomb is certainly outside the walls of the Old City. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, however, is inside the walls, but it was outside the walls until about a decade after the crucifixion of Christ, when the so-called Third North Wall was built by Herod Agrippa I. All the tombs in the Garden Tomb area date from 7 to 9 centuries BC, the time of Jeremiah or Isaiah, rather than Jesus. But the tombs within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre were new in the time of Jesus. The Garden Tomb has an aura of calmness that encourages meditation. As you walk around the gravel paths between simple flower beds and shrubs and under the dark pines, you can go 1 by 1 or 2 by 2 into the tomb and pray for what lies nearest to your heart. A service is not necessary. It is a place in which you should meet with God alone, quietly, without distracting words, in tranquility. Among Holy Land sites, the Sea of Galilee has changed comparatively little since Jesus walked on its shores and recruited 4 fishermen as his first disciples. A picturesque, heart-shaped lake set among hills in northern Israel, this freshwater sea is 21 kilometers long and 13 kilometers wide at its widest, with a maximum depth of 43 meters. In other names include the Sea of Tiberias, the Lake of Gennesaret, and in Hebrew, Lake Chinnereth or Kinneret. Jesus made the fishing town of Capharnaum the center of his itinerant ministry in Galilee, using the lake, its boats, and its shores to spread the good news. He calmed a storm, he walked on the water, and probably even swam in the lake. It was about the usually serene waters of the Sea of Galilee that Jesus began his public ministry, teaching in the synagogues and curing the sick. Crowds flocked to him, quote, "For he taught as one having authority, not as their scribes," Matthew 7:29. Perhaps his best-known discourse, the Sermon on the Mount, is believed to have been delivered on the Mount of Beatitudes, also known as Mount Eremos. This small hill is on the lake's northwestern shore, between Capernaum and Tagba. Tagba is also the traditional site where Jesus fed a crowd of 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. The apostles had fished all night with empty nets. Just after daybreak, Jesus appeared and told them where to find a miraculous catch. When the apostles came ashore, they found the risen Lord had cooked breakfast for them.
And teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always, even to the very end of the age.
Because it lies low in the Great Rift Valley, surrounded by hills, the Sea of Galilee is prone to sudden turbulence. Storms of the kind that Jesus calmed in Mark 4:35-41 are a well-known hazard for Galilee fishermen. With little warning, mighty squalls can sweep down the wadis or valleys around the lake, whipping its tranquil surface into treacherous waves. Such storms often arrive in mid-afternoon as the heat of the day sucks down the cool air from the heights. In 1986, during a severe drought when the water level dropped, the remains of an ancient fishing boat were found in the lake bed. It was old enough to have been on the water in the time of Jesus and his disciples. Dubbed the Jesus boat, it's now on permanent display near the lakeside.